Hey, I hope you had a good bank holiday Monday. We're now moving on into Mark 14, 12 to 31, and what is known as the Last Supper. It's there's loads to talk about when we get to these passages, so I'm going to try and keep this briefish. When it comes to the Passover meal, this is a moment at which the Jewish people were not just kind of remembering something that happened, but they were trying to actually live in it. They did things in a certain way so that they inhabited what happened, and it was their story of how God had saved them that they were kind of walking into it and enacting. They lived it in the way it would have been first done, so they wear their coats to eat. They kill the lamb and have it cooked in a special way. They have certain things that they wouldn't have at certain times. It was about entering in, and the youngest would ask questions about how it all worked. And so Jesus is going to this Passover meal, and it's very definitely Jesus's Passover meal. He's the one who says this is where it's going to be, and either he's prearranged it and there's some code words, kind of like find a man carrying water on his head. That's quite unusual. It would normally be women carrying the water in those very strict times in terms of what genders did. And he sets it all up, and it's his Passover, which he is doing in an upper room. So an upper room, when we talk about upper rooms, they're stone houses that they would build in Israel at the time, and it would be literally a smaller box on top of a big box. So the upper room were kind of special rooms, and often they were for guests or they were for special things, and so somebody would have, out of their hospitality, which is a really high value there, given this room to Jesus and the disciples where he has planned everything. And so they have preparations for this meal, and he does things specifically and differently. He points out various things. He points out it's quite a sad meal in Mark's Gospel. This isn't a final celebratory meal. This is a sad meal. They find out that one of the 12, one of those dipping their bread with him, is going to betray him. They're kind of expecting betrayal, but not from this tight band of friends and followers. And then we get to what Jesus does with the bread and the wine. And he says, this is my body. So he's saying, this is me. And then he breaks it. And he gives it to them. And he kind of says, this is what is going to happen to me. And it kind of makes it so this meal that they were kind of enacting, the saving of Israel back in the days of Moses, Jesus says, now we're enacting what's about to happen. I'm going to break this bread. And they would never have forgotten, I don't think, every time they ate bread and they ripped bread and they broke bread. I don't think they've ever forgotten Jesus and the cross. And Jesus uses bread over and over again. He, throughout Mark's Gospel, when he feeds the 5,000, he blesses the bread, breaks it and gives it. And there's enough left for 12. And then the second feeding miracle, he blesses it, broke it, and gave it. And 7 baskets are left, and 7 is a picture of completion. And the first one, there's 12 left, and there's the 12 tribes of Israel. And then at different times he's talked to them, and they've said, we've got no bread, and he's used bread in this symbol. And it's been a symbol all the way through, and here it is. And then he moves on to the cup, and this is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many. So they weren't allowed to drink blood, Jewish people. And they saw the one blood they were allowed to drink was the wine out of the grape, they saw as the blood of the grape. So that was the one thing they were allowed to drink. But he's kind of saying this is a really important agreement, a covenant we're making, and covenants had to be sealed in blood. So here is my blood to seal a new agreement, a new salvation. And it's so full and pregnant with meaning upon meaning upon meaning, and I could bash on about it for ages. But just get a sense that there's loads going on here, absolutely loads. And then they kind of set out and they they go to the Mount of Olives, and there's all this like, you're all going to fall away from me. And it's Peter that says, even if they all fall away, I won't. And Jesus said so many times, you know, whoever wants to be great among you, put yourself last. He said, you know, take up your cross and follow me. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it, and all those kind of things. And we see that Peter is not ready to be a leader because he's competitive and I'm going to be the best and I'm not like them, I'll sort it out. Peter is ready to lead later in the story, but right now he's not ready to be the leader of the church that he is by the time we get to Acts. I think whenever we read these kind of texts, it's time to be humble. You can read them and go, well, I'd have done the right thing. But reading it and going, just, I think, humbly listening, reading it over, being there, thinking, well, that must have been right, like, and they hadn't understood that Jesus had to die for them, the disciples, over and over. How much do we understand what it is to live a life of following Jesus with the costs of it? It's wonderful and it's beautiful and it's the best life in the world, but it's full of these kind of moments of Jesus doing surprising things and setting things up with it, but then he shows us the truth and it impacts us on an incredibly deep level. And at the moment we're not able to meet in the building and have bread and wine and remember Jesus together, and I really miss that. But we can remember Jesus every time we eat and drink, and think of the price that he paid to build a new relationship between humanity and God, and to give us life in all its fullness. And I guess rather than saying, hey, go and do this, that or the other, for me it's just, can we come in humility? Can we come in humility to Jesus, knowing how desperately we need him as we read this text?